Restaurant businesses hoping to survive the pandemic have to adapt, and that can mean a lot more than just moving furniture. To give us some ideas about what that could mean, as well as the need for help with design, are the owner of the South Boston restaurant Coppersmith, Gerry Curtain, and principal and co-founder of the Roadie architectural firm, Eric Robinson. Thank you both very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
I want to start with Gerry because you're right there right in the front line of this right now, and you're riding the surge in the restaurant sector, up till the early part of this year. Given the given the design that you had in place for that, how much have you had to change that?
Well, we've changed it pretty significantly. Basically, what we've had to do is pivot from serving hundreds of people inside to now serving 100 people outside primarily. Obviously, we've had some other changes where we're able to do some inside seating now, but it's most of our business now is really 180 degrees from an interior spatially type situation to external, and Roadie helped us with those types of layouts, etc.
Well, I wonder about the skill, because when I see the photos of the way things were before the pandemic, it looked sort of crowded, maybe even dense, but not claustrophobic. It was comfortable. So, I mean, don't you have to give up a lot of market business there for that?
We actually have. Our head count is probably down by about 40% from a layout standpoint. Now that we're external primarily. But we've been one of the lucky ones. I think we've had a lot of room to work even outside the building. We've grabbed a couple of parking lots next to our spaces and has worked with the city and the licensing board to really expand our footprint. So it's given us probably 250 seats, maybe a little bit more, where internally we had about 375 historically. So there's been some changes. We've been one of the lucky ones because we've had some spaces that we've been able to take advantage of external to the building that abut our real estate.
Turning to Eric, as you heard from Gerry, he has room to work with. That's pretty limited for most restaurants. So how do you make the most of that?
That is absolutely true. Gerry has a ton of outdoor adjacent space that he was able to take advantage of. And, what we're finding is, there is a trend to take advantage of any little space that you can out on the sidewalk. The city has definitely relaxed some of the, the requirements associated with the traditional sidewalk seating approach. And you're starting to see them pop up all over. I live in Dorchester as well. And, we're seeing restaurants take over the parking lane of the street. And just giving them any ability to expand their dining to the, to adjacent to their place is something that we're helping with, and we're seeing happening a lot. So it's pretty exciting in some ways.
Well, of course, one of the features of restaurants, the trendy restaurants before the pandemic, were things like open kitchen, this very kind of congregate settings. What changes have to be made with that?
Well, we'll see when it all starts to come back in some kind of new reality, I guess, for lack of a better term. I mean, right now, as I'm sure Gerry can reinforce, and we've heard from all of our clients, it's survival mode. And I think that is coupled with, I would say, patrons and supporters of restaurants are as eager to get out and support their local restaurants or places they've been for years, and seeing them suffer. So I think in a way, the aesthetics and the ambiance and the that's in the background and put on the back burner a little bit. Right now, it's about just kind of having the ability to get out and, see other people. And, the first time I was out, we were actually visiting one of our restaurants, or one of our projects, Dot Brewery, on the roof deck, the new roof deck. And it was a little strange, but we were out there and everything was set up in the, in some of the COVID setup. But I think just to get out and see people in, somewhat in a communal sort of environment is something that people are yearning for. So I think people are willing to kind of sit on the street on Dorchester Ave to have some dinner out with some friends, but that's okay for now. So we'll see where it goes, you know, in the future.
Gerry, what was the most difficult adjustment for you?
Well, again, but more than, I would say going from an interior situation to an exterior situation. Obviously, there's concerns about things like the weather when you're exterior and trying to manage through that with rainstorms, et cetera. We've been lucky enough for the last couple of weeks where we've had a good spell of the weather. We've done a lot of things like tenting a lot of our spaces to try to mitigate that, umbrellas. But again, it's a whole different dynamic now from the way we had been doing business to the way we're doing business now, because again, it's things like dealing with weather-related items, layouts that are now exterior, distances from the kitchen, things like that, managing through that, keeping things clean, obviously, mitigating all the risks related to COVID, which are substantial, with Rhodey has helped us with. So it's a combination of items, but again, all manageable. And it's just, again, our customers have been very patient with us, and hope they'll continue to be patient with us. But as Eric said, a lot of people just want to be out. They're lingering a little bit longer. It makes managing, reservations a little bit more difficult, but we're happy to have the business. But I would say it's a combination of items that really has changed that we're working through.
Gerry, as the reopening migrates indoors for the restaurant business, what about air quality? Do people have to do things differently about that?
Yeah, we have having a special emphasis around our HVAC system, cleaning, et cetera, bringing in more fresh air. We again we have some overhead doors that in effect make our space that it's interior have a lot of fresh air. Two large garage doors that we keep open throughout service. The funny thing is I don't think we've had a customer inside yet, just based on the weather. So we're still seeing a lot of our customers want to be seated outside. But yeah, there's a whole different dynamic with HVAC, airflow, fresh air intake, windows open, overhead doors open, that I think is part of the new paradigm.
Eric, one thing that came to my attention was that a lot of features of modernist architecture in the last century were more or less triggered by epidemics. What do you see as the residue of COVID-19 as far as design?
That's a great point. I actually read a similar article not so long ago, and sort of reflecting on that. It'll be interesting to see. And, I think that is the environment's going to change that much will be something that's interesting. I mean, I would say it seems like environmentally we have some challenges, but right now socially is like a lot of the bigger challenges of how do we, reinforce the mask wearing and the distancing and sort of being careful about that. At least I feel like the short term, that will be the goal. I'm not sure yet how the long-term impact will be on our physical spaces. A cure for this, or a vaccination for it, it might change the dynamic of that. But we are looking at different office environments, and I think we're planning for this as an interim case where we can allow for expansion or movable, moving the desk configurations. But you did hit on a point where, as Gerry mentioned, the systems and mechanical systems and ventilation, I think, will really be important to make sure that we're flushing the air out of spaces and moving things along. That is, it's part of the new energy codes, and it will be inherent in how we design and build. But it's just another factor that we're going to have to think a little bit harder about as we're developing spaces and buildings.
Gerry, restaurants are also about atmosphere, and if I'm not mistaken, your restaurant was rated pretty highly as a place for having a first date. Do you think you'll be able to do that maybe 6 or 12 months from now still?
I do. Again, Eric had mentioned if there's breakthroughs in and around a vaccine, things like that, I think things will begin to slowly get back to normal. I do think spatially there's going to be less people in larger spaces for a long period of time, say 1 to 2 years, as people get over the shock of what's happened. But I sure hope so. We've got a very unique space. We're hoping to get people back into it. But at some point, I think that will return. But obviously that remains to be seen.
Eric, I know restaurants with enough size and enough maybe affluent clientele can call a design firm and capitalize on that. But what about some of the smaller restaurants that are struggling? I mean, do you see that maybe there ought to be some way to help them, maybe doing it through CDCs or something like that?
Sure. I mean, we are trying to help if we can, but I think there are a lot of restaurants out there that are on the smaller end. We're working with Commonwealth Kitchen right now, who's a nonprofit that we helped develop a long time ago. But they are, we're helping them help their tenants, and they have sort of partnerships expand some of their outdoor seating, and that's something that we're willing to do pro bono and help them out to give them the ability to expand in their space. It's not super complicated, and it's something that we can do fairly easily, and so I think it's a great opportunity for us to contribute as much as we can. But I think there's got to be the coming together of a lot of different factors. And, I think there's, we do need to build barriers, and we need to do things when we expand in the street for safety reasons. So I think, as a community, I think we can certainly come together and help. And I think that, the construction industry and some other ones also could start to help pitch in on some of those opportunities. And I think finding a way to access those, I'm sure there's plenty of people that are willing to help and contribute, and maybe the CDCs is a way to kind of help that path forward for people looking for some help.
One other question. I know we've heard a lot about the struggles of the food sector, but with the recent slowdown or even shutdown of construction projects, what's been happening for architects?
So for us, we luckily, fortuitously, we've been busy, and I think it really goes to where we are in terms of our relationships with our clients and where projects are in terms of their overall life cycle. Those have continued on. We are seeing the kind of typical approval process of entitlements come back online with the city, which is great. So the next step is really getting back out into the communities a little bit more, which we've had some exposure to through similar formats of Zoom, where we have community meetings and presentations. So, the construction on site definitely had slowed down, obviously, and stopped in the city of Boston. We're now seeing our projects back up and running from a construction standpoint. So that's good news as well. So I think from the industry standards, we are seeing a movement back to some semblance of normalcy, but not normal for any certain. But the thing I think we're seeing, and it's similar with Gerry in the restaurant. It's just special attention to the logistics of the operations, and Gerry's team and him, they need to work so much harder at making sure that pathways are followed and sort of logistics of keeping things clean. Same in the construction industry. We're seeing it on our job sites where the contractors are really focusing on making sure it's a safe environment, for me as a visitor in terms of the architect, and as well as the folks there on a daily basis working on the site. So it's, that will be around for a while. And I think it's something that we're excited to see coming back. And I think everybody's taking this, quite seriously, and, paying attention to it as we kind of have to deal with it on a daily basis.